Here's a question that sounds like a casual thought experiment, but turns into something genuinely uncomfortable the longer you sit with it. If you had to pick one single food, unlimited quantity, for the rest of your life, which one would you choose? Which one would actually keep your body functioning, your organs working, and you alive for as long as possible? Most people have an instinctive answer. They think about it for a second, land on something that feels nutritious or substantial, and feel fairly confident about their choice. And most of those instinctive answers are wrong, but wrong in ways that reveal something genuinely interesting about nutrition, about what the human body actually needs to function, and about why human beings developed such a spectacularly varied diet over the course of our existence. So here are the rules. Unlimited water is provided. This is purely about food. No vitamins, no supplements, no adding anything on the side. The food is cooked normally. You are a healthy adult, and you have to survive on this one food and nothing else for as long as possible. Subscribe to Freud Mind and let us get into it. Before we start evaluating candidates, we need to establish what the body actually requires to function. Because without knowing what you need, you cannot judge how well any single food provides it. And this is where most people's understanding of nutrition is genuinely incomplete. Your body needs calories, energy, to power every biological process, from heartbeat to thought to cell repair. Without adequate calories, the body begins breaking down its own tissue for fuel, starting with fat stores and progressing to muscle. Caloric sufficiency is the first requirement, but it is far from the only one. Your body needs protein, specifically the essential amino acids that your cells use to build and repair tissue, produce enzymes, support immune function, and maintain the structural proteins that your muscles, skin, hair, and organs depend on. There are 9 essential amino acids that the human body cannot synthesize itself and must obtain from food. A food that lacks even one of these creates a bottleneck that limits everything the others can do. Your body needs fat, not just for energy storage, but for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, for the structural integrity of every cell membrane in the body, for brain function, and for the production of hormones that regulate almost everything. Essential fatty acids, the ones the body cannot make, must come from diet. Your body needs carbohydrates for efficient energy supply, particularly for brain function, which has a strong preference for glucose as its primary fuel. It needs fiber for digestive function and gut microbiome health. It needs vitamins, 13 essential ones, for an enormous range of metabolic processes. It needs minerals including iron, calcium, zinc, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, each with specific roles in specific systems. And it needs all of these things consistently, over time, because deficiencies do not produce immediate collapse. They produce gradual deterioration that can take weeks or months to become a serious problem. The challenge of surviving on a single food is that almost no single food covers all of these bases adequately. The history of human nutrition is largely a history of variety, of combining different foods to cover the gaps that each individual food leaves. Understanding what gaps each candidate leaves is the key to understanding which one gives you the best chance. Let us start at the low end of the scale, with the foods that feel substantial but fall apart quickly under nutritional scrutiny. Imagine you chose something like chips, or any heavily processed, high-calorie, low-nutrient snack food. The calories are there, the fat is there, the salt is there. You would not starve in the traditional sense, not quickly, because caloric sufficiency is the first requirement and processed snack foods handle that part reasonably well. But the nutritional collapse would begin almost immediately, because beyond calories and fat, there is almost nothing useful. No meaningful protein, no vitamins to speak of, no fiber, no essential micronutrients. Within weeks, multiple deficiency-related processes would begin operating simultaneously. Protein deficiency would affect tissue repair, immune function, and muscle maintenance. Vitamin deficiencies would affect neurological function, skin health, immune response, and cell production. The body would be running on fuel with no maintenance materials. It is the equivalent of putting petrol in a car while ignoring oil, coolant, brakes, and everything else that keeps the engine from destroying itself. The verdict on highly processed foods is essentially immediate. They fail not because they lack calories, but because calories alone are nowhere near sufficient for the body's actual operational requirements. Now consider something that feeds a significant portion of the human population. Rice. Plain white rice, unlimited. Nothing else. The first thing that works in rice's favor is that it is genuinely filling and genuinely energetic. Carbohydrates are plentiful. The caloric content is solid. There is a reason rice is a dietary staple for billions of people. As part of a varied diet, it is an efficient and reliable energy source. But as a sole food, it fails in several significant ways. Protein content is low. There is some protein in rice, but not much. And what is there does not provide a complete amino acid profile. Fat content is minimal. The vitamin and mineral profile is limited, with white rice, in particular, having most of its nutritional content stripped during processing. The most historically significant consequence of surviving on white rice alone is beriberi, a disease caused by thiamine deficiency, vitamin B1, which affects neurological and cardiovascular function. Beriberi was documented extensively in Asian populations that shifted from brown rice to white rice. And the absence of thiamine in polished white rice was the direct cause of serious and widespread illness. Rice feeds billions, but almost nobody in the world lives on rice alone. It is always paired with vegetables, legumes, fish, or meat. Bread has sustained human civilization for thousands of years. The history of bread, its role in ancient Egypt, in Rome, in medieval Europe, in virtually every agricultural civilization, suggests something fundamentally important about it as a food. And it is important as a component of a varied diet. As a sole food, however, it faces many of the same problems as rice. Calories are there. Some protein is present, more than in rice, depending on the type of bread. But the fat content is low. The vitamin and mineral profile is incomplete. Fiber content varies significantly by type, with white bread offering very little. The most obvious long-term deficiency on a bread-only diet would be vitamin C, a nutrient that bread contains essentially none of. And the consequences of vitamin C deficiency are not subtle. Scurvy, the vitamin C deficiency disease, begins to appear within 4 to 12 weeks of a diet with no vitamin C. The gums deteriorate, connective tissue breaks down, old wounds reopen, the immune system fails. Scurvy was historically the bane of sailors on long voyages who had plenty of calories from ship's biscuit but no access to fresh fruit or vegetables and no vitamin C whatsoever. The result was catastrophic and well documented. Bread sustained civilizations, but it never sustained anyone alone. Now something that feels healthy and virtuous and is genuinely packed with certain nutrients. Bananas are nutritionally interesting. They contain vitamin B6, vitamin C, potassium, carbohydrates, and a meaningful amount of natural sugar for energy. They are one of the few foods that directly address electrolyte balance through potassium content. They are filling in the short term, and they have a water content that contributes to hydration alongside the unlimited water already on the table. But the protein content of a banana is minimal, roughly 1 gram per medium banana, with an incomplete amino acid profile. The fat content is essentially 0. On a banana-only diet, the first serious problem to emerge would be protein deficiency, followed by fat deficiency, followed by the downstream effects of both: muscle wasting, hormonal disruption, neurological symptoms from the absence of essential fatty acids, and gradually declining immune function. You might feel fine for several weeks because the carbohydrate energy is real and the potassium and B6 are useful. but the structural materials for maintaining the body would be absent, and the deterioration would be slow but inevitable. You would almost certainly grow tired of bananas before your body was finished with you, which is perhaps the most important practical consideration. Here is where most people who have thought about this question land their answer: eggs. And it is a reasonable instinct. Eggs have a nutritional profile that is genuinely remarkable among whole foods. The protein content is excellent, with a complete amino acid profile that is often used as the benchmark against which other protein sources are measured. The fat content is significant and useful, including fat-soluble vitamins that depend on dietary fat for absorption. Eggs contain vitamins A, D, E, B12, riboflavin, folate, phosphorus, selenium, and a range of other micronutrients in meaningful quantities. They are calorie-dense without being empty. They are genuinely filling. And they are remarkably versatile, which matters for the psychological sustainability of any single-food diet. The weaknesses are real, but easy to underestimate. Eggs contain essentially no vitamin C, the same scurvy risk as bread, operating on the same timeline. They contain minimal carbohydrates, which means the brain is running on protein and fat conversion for glucose rather than direct carbohydrate supply. A metabolic state that is manageable but creates ongoing physiological stress. They contain minimal fiber, which means gut motility and microbiome health would deteriorate over time, creating digestive problems that would eventually become significant. And the absence of vitamin C means that no matter how excellent the other nutritional content, the connective tissue deterioration of scurvy would begin within weeks to months. Eggs are almost a complete food, but almost matters enormously when the gaps are going to kill you. And now, the food that consistently surprises people when this question is examined properly: the humble potato. Before you dismiss it, and people consistently do because potatoes have spent decades being unfairly categorized as nutritionally empty filler, consider what is actually inside a potato with its skin on. Carbohydrates for energy, present in substantial quantities. Protein, modest but present, and with a surprisingly complete amino acid profile relative to expectations. Fat, minimal, which is a weakness but not as catastrophic as the complete absence in some other candidates. Vitamin C, present in meaningful quantities, enough to prevent scurvy on a potato-only diet, which is a significant advantage over eggs and bread. Potassium, very high, making potatoes one of the better dietary sources of this essential mineral. Vitamin B6, present. Iron, magnesium, zinc, present in useful amounts. Fiber, particularly in the skin, present and meaningful for digestive function. The historical evidence for the potato's nutritional capability is not theoretical. It is documented in the lived experience of populations that depended heavily on it. During the period in Irish history when the potato became the dominant food for a large portion of the rural population, people were surviving on diets that were sometimes overwhelmingly potato-based, supplemented with small amounts of dairy, and they were broadly healthy. Before the famine, which was caused by the destruction of the crop, not by the nutritional inadequacy of the potato itself. Explorers and travelers throughout history have noted the sustaining quality of potatoes in a way that no other single plant food quite matches. The potato is not perfect. The fat content is genuinely low, which would eventually create problems with fat-soluble vitamin absorption and hormonal function. The protein content, while present, is not as high as eggs and would become a limiting factor over time. Certain B vitamins are present, but not in as complete a profile as you would want for long-term exclusive consumption. But compared to every other candidate on this list, compared to rice, bread, chips, bananas, and even eggs, the potato covers more nutritional bases more adequately than any of them. It is the closest thing to a complete food available in the plant kingdom that most people eat regularly. There are honorable mentions that deserve acknowledgement, because this is not a simple two-horse race, and some foods perform considerably better than the obvious popular choices. Milk, whole milk in unlimited quantities, performs surprisingly well on this analysis. It contains protein with a complete amino acid profile, fat, including fat-soluble vitamins, carbohydrates in the form of lactose, calcium in substantial quantities, vitamin D depending on fortification, B12, riboflavin, and a range of minerals. The weakness is that it contains no vitamin C and is low in iron. Adults also vary significantly in their ability to digest lactose efficiently, which creates a practical complication. But nutritionally, milk is a genuinely strong candidate. Historically, populations in pastoral regions that relied heavily on milk and dairy products tended to maintain relatively good nutritional status compared to those relying on grain alone. Oats perform better than most people expect. High in fiber, decent protein with a fairly good amino acid profile, useful minerals including iron and magnesium, and significant beta-glucan content that supports cardiovascular health. The weaknesses are similar to other plant foods: limited fat, no vitamin C, and incomplete coverage of fat-soluble vitamins. Fish, particularly fatty fish like salmon, is worth considering because the fat profile is exceptional. Omega-3 fatty acids, fat-soluble vitamins including vitamin D and vitamin A, complete protein, minerals including selenium and iodine, and reasonable B vitamin content. The weakness is that most fish contain no vitamin C and limited carbohydrates. But as a sole food, fatty fish would keep you functional for considerably longer than most plant foods. What happens if you actually try to live on a single food? The progression is worth understanding because it is not a sudden collapse. It is a gradual one that follows a predictable sequence. The first thing that deteriorates is not your health, but your sanity. The psychological experience of eating the same food at every meal, every day, with no variation, no anticipation, no pleasure in food choice, is profoundly destabilizing for most people. Humans are not designed for dietary monotony. The pleasure of eating is partly hedonic and partly functional, and the functional part includes the drive toward variety that ensures we cover nutritional bases. When that drive is frustrated indefinitely, the psychological toll is significant and begins almost immediately. After boredom comes the first nutritional gaps, the deficiencies in whichever nutrients your chosen food lacks most significantly. These do not produce immediate symptoms in most cases. Vitamin C deficiency takes 4 to 12 weeks to produce visible scurvy symptoms. Protein deficiency takes weeks to months to produce measurable muscle wasting, but the processes that will eventually produce symptoms begin immediately because the body is running on a budget and certain items are not on the supply list. Then come the energy changes, either a shortage of overall calories if your chosen food is volumetrically filling but calorie light, or a metabolic adjustment if you are running on an unusual macronutrient ratio. Then the more subtle signs of micronutrient deficiency: fatigue, cognitive changes, immune vulnerability, skin changes. And then, eventually, the full expression of whatever deficiency your food's profile has been building toward. The human brain did not develop cravings arbitrarily. The drive toward dietary variety, the reason you want something sweet after something savory, the reason a meal feels incomplete without certain textures or flavors, the reason you can eat a food you love every day for a week and start to lose enthusiasm for it, is a feature of human neurology that evolved for good reason. Different foods provide different nutrients. The brain learned to associate the taste and smell profiles of different foods with different nutritional content. Sweetness with carbohydrates, savory richness with protein and fat, bitterness sometimes with minerals or phytochemicals. The drive to seek variety is partly a nutritional guidance system, steering the body toward the diverse intake it requires. Cravings are not always accurate. Habits, emotions, and the modern food environment all influence them in ways that do not always serve nutrition. But the underlying drive toward variety is not accidental. Humans developed thousands of different foods, thousands of culinary traditions, thousands of ways of combining and preparing ingredients, not because variety is a luxury, but because no single food gives the body everything it needs. The single food thought experiment reveals this with unusual clarity, because when you try to find the food that could sustain you alone, you quickly discover how much the diversity of human eating is a nutritional necessity rather than a cultural accident. So what is the answer? Which single food gives you the best chance? The potato, eaten with its skin, comes closest. Not because it is perfect, but because it covers the most bases in the most balanced way. The presence of vitamin C distinguishes it from eggs and bread. The reasonable protein content distinguishes it from rice. The fiber content supports digestive function in a way that eggs cannot. The carbohydrate content provides direct glucose for the brain in a way that fatty fish cannot. No other commonly available food provides as wide a range of useful nutrients in as balanced a configuration. If you forced a nutritional scientist to pick one food and survive on it for as long as possible, the most defensible answer, based on breadth of nutritional coverage, is the potato. Not glamorous, not what most people guess. But the nutritional content, particularly when the skin is retained, makes it the most complete single food available to most people in the world. And yet, even the potato would eventually fail you. The fat content is too low for long-term hormonal health and fat-soluble vitamin absorption. The protein, while present, is not sufficient for high physical demands. And the psychological experience of eating only potatoes, every meal, every day for months, that alone might be what ends the experiment before the nutritional gaps do. Humans did not invent thousands of different foods just for taste. We did it because no single food, not even the best one, gives our bodies everything they need. The variety is not indulgence. It is the solution to a biological problem that our ancestors figured out long before nutrition science gave us the words to explain why. Like and subscribe to Freud Mind for more.